Hello. Hi there. Hi there. Thank you so much for coming. And everybody has been asking about Spot. Spot is coming after the talk, so you guys don't leave as soon as Spot shows up. Anyway, thank you so much to Jorn for hosting me here. Jorn. So I'm here in conversation with Peter Hirshberg. Peter has been a friend and a mentor, and I'm very grateful he's having this conversation with me. I couldn't have thought of a better person to do it because he has a 1,000 miles view on two very important topics we're going to talk about, and that's history and technology. And Peter has a background both in social media. He sold a techno rally many years ago. Also, he is the chairman of a great art organization here, Gray Area, which tackles very modern art and technology. And he understands art very well. He grew up in New York. His mom was a phenomenal woman who took him to the Met, never on Saturday. You know what happens on Saturday. And yeah, so welcome.
Yes, welcome all. Is this on?
Am I too loud or too quiet?
Now it's working. You can never expect technology to work. This is exciting because tonight we get to talk about machines and art, a topic that's often overlooked, and you bring quite a perspective to it, both on how you came into this and how your background gave you a unique lens in technology industry in America. So I think we want to start with a little bit about you. Why machines, Agnieszka? And both how did you come to this, and kind of politically, what does it mean to you?
So I grew up in Eastern Europe, in Poland, in a very industrial city, Łódź, and there was a lot of old machines around me. And growing up in Poland, we were still behind the Iron Curtain, and you always looked at America as this kind of dream land we aspired to. And for us, America was industry. Like, we had great culture. Poland has great history, very interesting history. But when we thought about technology and power, we always thought about America. And that's how I got into machines.
Yeah, you're almost an unrequited machine romantic. Right? You said to me that machines represent benevolence. Anytime a man wants to do something extraordinary, he builds a machine as an extension. It's almost a spiritual thing.
Yes, I have a one side. Is this better like this?
Yeah, it's a little better like this, I think.
Like this? Okay. Give me some okay. So, yeah, I have a very black and white view of technology. I'm very optimistic about technology. Living here in Silicon Valley and having access to some amazing companies. And yeah, it's a very spiritual thing. And then when we get to Boston Dynamics, my experience there, it just confirmed again that it's more than just a machine doing work. It's a very cultural, historical, anthropological. There is a very big story there.
And we're going to get to kind of all the ambivalence that people have had about machines since the industrial era kind of shows up in art. So we'll see some of that in a moment. The other thing is, from an art perspective, there's a relationship between machines and portraiture in your world. You started doing other kinds of portraiture things, but kind of discovered they weren't really revealing your essence. And when you discovered machines, you got all excited.
Sure. So I was trained as a portrait painter, and very fast I kind of got bored a little bit with painting the figure because I became very good at it, but there was no interesting story to tell, really. And then a friend who became a patron and a very dear friend, Paul Stein, who is a developer here in the Valley, in San Francisco, he asked me to paint something for him. It was an old machine, and it felt really very much home. And I painted that machine, and it was like, I'm never going back. And I remember why I went into art in the first place.
It was a fire alarm. You painted a red little fire alarm box?
Yes.
Right, it was like machines. And then, but it turns out, like, I had a bunch of machines, and so
then my garage started, my studio that turned into my garage that turned into my studio became, a pile of, more and more machines, and I was dumpster hunting and going to LA with Peter, looking for machines. But going back to portraiture,
let's talk about this machine and portraiture.
So what's important to remember is the way I paint machines, it's very grounded in my training as a painter, as a portrait painter. So when we think about portraiture, it always reflects important figures in history. And then when you think about how it's stylistically how it's presented, it's almost one central figure. It's not a landscape. I never paint landscapes, and I'm very interested in the essence of the subject. So that's why I also loved old machines. They had a lot of history, kind of like an old person.
Yeah, and then, okay, so then you started discovering kind of this cornucopia of machines, right? So there was a linear actuator.
There was a linear actuator from the garbage in LA. There was a bunch of very nice space objects from Steve Jurvetson that I painted also. Then there was from Peter's collection. This is from your collection,
Yeah.
from your house. Then I ended up eventually at a ship that was what? One big machine.
Yes, you moved into a machine, right? So the interesting thing here is once you discovered you were interested in machines, like your view of the world changed because there were old machines everywhere, right? Your garage filled with them. Steve Jurvetson, who you knew, who is a tech VC but collected a lot of Apollo stuff. Suddenly they were all machines.
Sure.
Okay, so then you moved into a machine. You moved into the USS Hornet, which is an aircraft carrier.
Right. And it wasn't just, and the theme started appearing. So I was very much still about portraiture. I always define myself as a portrait painter, kind of in a Warhol style. I mean, Warhol is a portrait painter and an illustrator, so I feel very connected to Warhol in that sense. But also a theme of heroism showing up. And of course, at USS Hornet, this is as heroic as it gets. And it's also kind of the past, the heroic past of America. My childhood from Poland is always important in my background. So I have a very emotional, positive view of technology again, and especially with the old machines. And there was a lot of this on the Hornet, of course.
And this is a portrait of an aircraft engine without its propeller, but you've added to it an element from kind of historic portraiture.
Yeah, so there's again, I always come back to the same theme ad nauseum, but so when we think about if you show up to have your portrait taken, you dress up. So my idea of it in a machine was I added the ribbon, and it was the moment of the machine to I want to be seen, and that hence the ribbon.
And it's also interesting to point out that where you've done your artists in residencies reflects your kind of interest in technology machine. It's not an accident that you did an artist in residency at an aircraft carrier, at Boston Dynamics, where they make robots, at the World Trade Center, and now here at an innovation center in San Francisco. So you've kind of like made your artistic home.
Yeah, machines again, they're very close to me, and in a sense, and I go generally to places. I've never been to a place really that has an artist in residence program. I generally find something that excites me, and I come with an idea of not a transaction. All I want to ask is access generally, and that opens some wonderful doors for me. And again, going back to some very secretive technologies, because I have this super optimistic view of technology, they open doors to me. They're like not scared that I'm gonna portray them in a negative way.
Right, and I mean, it turns out there's a whole history of portraying machines as art, which we often don't think of, right? I mean, often people think of technology and art in different buckets, but of course, I mean, all art is technology. Impressionism started with, they had oil paints and you could go outside. Photography was art. This whole tradition kind of started in 1934 when Philip Johnson curated the machine in art at the Museum of Modern Art. And that same kind of almost spiritual sense that you have towards machines, which can be a little startling, say, at a time when we're very conflicted about technology and AI and machines here. I just want to read you something that the photographer Paul Strand said in the 30s. Commenting on his own photography of machines, he said, "Men have consummated a new creative act, a new trinity. God the machine, materialistic empiricism the sun, and science the Holy Ghost. And this was kind of the American utopian view of machines. Let's talk about this one. What are we looking at here, and where did it come from?
Well, goes again our history. So you took me to the Computer History Museum, and I was invited to be a speaker at Google X conference, and they've asked me, could you find some machines, some technology that reflects women in technology, because we're in the Silicon Valley, so we always miss that. So we went to the Computer History Museum, and I saw this, and but then it was Hopper's code that lived inside that machine. And Peter, who's much more geeky than I, can explain you how the code lived in this thing.
This thing is great, right? That's a beautiful painting. And what is it of? It's actually of a mercury memory tank. So in UNIVAC 1, so we're talking about 1950 now, before we had random access memory or core memory, where would we keep the code running in a machine? And the answer was you'd stick it in a pool of mercury, and it would travel at the speed of sound. If we look at the next slide, so that's the actual thing you painted, and then the code or the software that was running would travel that down that delay line, and that's how they would keep it. Well, what's interesting is Grace Hopper, who wrote COBOL and is regarded as one of the preeminent computer scientists, her memory and her ideas, Grace's ideas, ran in that thing, in that visceral liquid. So that was your, and then there was another one that you did for Google, which was you don't have a picture of it, but it was a nuclear something. What was the other one you did for the Google X?
For the Google. Oh yeah, I did a magnet from the linear
accelerator.
Stanford. Yeah, the magnet from the linear accentuator was, I can't pronounce it.
It was a linear accelerator. A woman won a Nobel Prize for nuclear work, right? So there were just all those great connections.
Let's go into history a little bit.
Okay, let's move ahead into history. So we talk about the fact that there's a history of machines in art. And of course, the history of machines in art largely begins in the industrial era and the 20th century. So let's talk about Italian futurism. And this is great because we have the good and the bad going on here, don't we?
Yeah, I think this is very important for the Valley, actually, to understand, also for me personally. So Italian futurism, it was a movement that grew around the excitement of innovation and the future, and kind of throwing past behind, and kind of like Silicon Valley in a sense, and also the optimism about the machine and technology in the city. So it's very much like me, but what happened with a lot of artists who were futurists, and they did a beautiful job, and they were very innovative, a lot of futurists ended supporting the fascists in Italy. So it's a kind of a moment, especially for me, because again, like I know I am unapologetically optimistic about technology, but futurism is a good example for all of us to a little bit sometimes pause and be more mindful about consequences, really, of what we're doing in innovation.
Yeah, so this is a beautiful kind of futurist machine age thing. I didn't even know this history. I did not realize how easily futurism slid into fascism.
Yeah.
I was at a show at the Guggenheim one day looking at these, and then the next one, kind of after all these beautiful machines with speed, were Italian dive bombers that Mussolini sent to go attack whoever he was attacking in North Africa, right? And so the key thing is that we learn from this that the machine is not an innocent bystander, and it's an instigator. And there are all these conversations we have in Silicon Valley, which are perhaps machines aren't good or bad, it's what we imbue them with, or does the architecture of machines somehow indicate its destiny? So Italian futurism was a warning, but at the same time in the United States, we were optimistic, and what was the US doing at that time?
Yeah, so the same exact time period, and what's happening in America, we also have a movement here that celebrates machine called precisionism. There is very few artists, but there's no darkness. And I think that's also that uniqueness of American, this melting pot that, quote, it cannot happen here. So that's why I'm also optimistic about America in that sense. So the same story, they're painting about machines, they celebrate innovation, the future, they kind of move behind the past, leave the past behind, but all that came out was beautiful paintings. There was no darkness. So that's optimistic.
That was precisionism. Okay, and at the same time, in America, you know, you can't talk about machines without talking about workers and labor. They've been kind of integrally connected from the beginning. And so you have Diego Rivera, and this is his beautiful piece from the Detroit Museum, right? Is this piece?
Well, this is part of the mural, yeah. That's just a small part of it.
So there's the mural, this Diego Rivera mural, which depicts very heroic workers building cars and machines, and particularly unheroic capitalists screwing everybody over. But then there is this machine which plays a mystic role.
Yeah, so also, so as further along I get in my career, I'm interested, the theme of heroism is very important to me, and I always think about that machines are our extension of humanity, and again, what Peter said, every time we want to do something great, we build a machine. Now that said, there's also the element of spiritual and kind of mystical, and I think that kind of, that starts showing also that Diego was aware of it. Of course, Diego Rivera was on the other side of that story. Again, I'm very optimistic. For Diego, machine was the oppressor. For me, the machine is the savior.
And it's also, that one we just saw was, that invoked a particular South American god, right?
Yes, well, I never know how to pronounce it, Kalakikwe.
Yeah. But that mysticism or that animation or that possibility you see in machines, right? You see beyond the animate. There's something...
Yes, I do think that I started getting more and more into it in my work, that I do think mankind, it's a very complex system, and it's a spiritual system, really, and we're all trying to find our own heroism in that system, within that system. And for me, again, I think machines represent that in a positive way. So
okay.
And we'll go back to it at the end, maybe. And that's why Renaissance also will come
up to
that. Yeah.
You were merrily moving along, painting all these machines very successfully, and then you encountered this really interesting moment when what was being created was as much in software and virtual as in the physical expression. This is Waymo, which was this was the LiDAR unit for an automated vehicle.
Oh boy.
But oh boy, when you got to this, it was...
I'm getting anxious just looking at it. So I did a residency at Waymo. Again, another company that doesn't have really a program. I kind of weaseled myself into it. And very excited that I'm going to paint it later. So I took on this huge project, very public, for a new, very exciting, very well-financed part of Google. And I wanted to. So the first time I really tackled new technology. It was a big mistake. Was too visible. I left actually humiliated. I couldn't finish the painting. I had to leave before it was finished. There was nothing to show for. But basically what I realized is that with all technology, I was very comfortable using very dark colors, very earthy colors, and being very serious. And that goes back again to portraiture. When you think about portraiture in art history, we think about Rembrandt. And what Rembrandt paints, he paints beautiful old people with a lot of essence. And like Peter said in the beginning, for me as a portrait painter, what I look for is the essence of the subject, not the superficial. So I was very successful painting old machines, old technology, because there was so much history there, just like for Rembrandt. You never see Rembrandt paint a baby, because it'd be a horrible painting. People laugh at him, like, what is that? So this is a baby or a teenager, and teenagers can be arrogant. They don't know anything. They pretend they know anything. They are very... Basically, the machine started becoming very hostile. And another layer of problems I had with it is that old machines, they really show the work. So you see you get what you see. So it's gears turning, or it's a wheel turning, or it's the engine blowing smoke. With new technology, we have no idea what's going on inside. So we have a box, very smooth, and something inside. And I think it's very hostile and was very difficult. So anyway, so it was a very hard moment for my career. And I left with nothing.
And
there were sketches that I just ended up throwing everything away.
Right. I mean, there were... You kept trying to figure out what the hell is this guy's essence, what's his personality, what's going on inside, which, okay, it's a black box. with a neural network thing that its programmers don't even know completely how it's working, and you're trying to paint its personality. I remember we were at the Museum of Modern Art one day, looking at all this abstract stuff, trying to figure out how do other artists deal with conceptual things.
Yes.
And it was, there was just a block. And
difficult to deal with. You were in your head, I'm like, help me! Like, you're helping me.
I mean, the other interesting thing is when you paint devices, even if you go to the Computer History Museum, the stuff from the first and second generation is great. It's giant vacuum tubes and beautiful machines. And today, everything looks like an iPhone or one of these. And it's like, okay, it's just not too inspiring for an artist.
Yeah, I would like to see Rembrandt paint a new machine. How would he tackle that?
But you had an aha moment when you encountered a new machine and it got better.
And then my savior came around. So I found out, I knew about Boston Dynamics for a while, but of course, this very secretive company, and but again, I weaseled myself into the situation. I found a friend who was an executive, and they made an introduction. And the way I operate, I just come and I ask, hey, can I just look at the machine? Then can I stay for a couple of days and do a sketch? And they're like, okay. And then like, well, can I stay 2 more days and do a little color study? And then a year later, I'm still there. So that's how I weaseled myself into Boston Dynamics.
And, I mean, your first reaction was, I'm not an illustrator, I don't paint robots, right? But then you realize something else.
Yes, correct. Yeah, so I always struggle, actually, as an artist with being between realism and abstraction. I'm not a fan of abstraction. At this point, I think it's figurative, historically, doesn't have a lot of meaning. It's very pleasing, and it attracts me, it excites me, and I know I could do well at it, but it terrifies me because it's too easy, and I want to make, for me, it's important to have a voice in history. So when I thought about painting a machine, I thought, well, that's just illustration. Like, I'm not an illustrator. I was very conflicted, but I knew this machine made history. It's a historical machine. It changed the world, and that's why my whole series that came out of it, Renaissance 2.0, I named it because, again, I understand the importance of that company in the world cannot be overstated, and especially with the dog. So yeah, I had a solution. So I went there with with the intention I want to just paint a portrait of Spot. And when I saw Spot walk up and down the stairs, I knew I have to honor the movement. And of course, who came to mind? Marcel Duchamp. All art conversations always end up talking about Marcel Duchamp. You have to mention his name. So there's Marcel Duchamp. But really in an honest way, for me, I was instantly, it's Marcel Duchamp, it's a Nude Descending the Staircase. That painting changed history the same way Boston Dynamics Spot changes the history. By the way, I don't work for Boston Dynamics. They don't pay me to say this. So just clearly, I just really admire them. They're very good. It's an amazing team. Yeah, and then that's what happened.
Okay, so Duchamp famously did this one on the left of the Nude Descending a Staircase, in which he took the Cubist oeuvre, which had not been around, Portraits in the Body, and he picked it up here. So that was the inspiration for Spot on the staircase.
So that was the inspiration, and again, yeah, for Duchamp really to take the body. Everyone is a painter, and that goes back to my personal history. That's why I was so attached to painting portraiture, because as a painter, you want to be very good at human figure. It's very difficult to paint, so it's an ego-driven pursuit to become very good at it. So of course, Duchamp, as an artist, he had to get to the nude figure, but he just did a brilliant thing with it, the most important painting of 20th century, probably. This is it, and that's my interpretation of it.
Okay, which brings us to your enduring thoughts about the Renaissance.
I want to go back. Just,
yeah.
Can I say,
yeah.
There's one thing. So the colors, I want to just mention the colors. I mentioned the colors before. It just occurred to me that with all technology, I was using very toned, dark colors, earth colors. But again, I thought about, okay, new technology is like a baby or like a teenager. What teenagers do? They dress in a ridiculous clothes. They want to be seen. They're loud. So for me, it's like kind of Spot going to prom. So that's why. So the colors are not accidental. They really, actually, there is a very important part of the story, the colors. Okay, we can move on.
Right.
We're almost there. Spot is coming soon, don't worry.
And, okay, this also plugs you in to another point in history when a movement kind of honors humanism and the human form, right? So the Renaissance does that, and in this case, you pick up Da Vinci, who kind of deconstructs and goes between the kind of the science of people and the art side of things.
Sure, yeah. So again, back to the Valley. I'm a huge fan of the Valley. I think it moves the world to a better place. And again, the name of the show is Renaissance 2.0 because the way the Valley changed and technology built here changes the world in a way that we can not go back. So the same kind of Renaissance. After Renaissance happened, after the printing press came out, the world was just changed forever. And I think this is the same moment. And also attitude towards humanity. And in a sense, that painting came also from my encounter with Atlas. So I saw Atlas, I saw it get up, move around, and it was clearly a very spiritual moment for me, feeling like a Westworld kind of moment. These are humanity's children or allies at the minimum. These are not just machines. So yeah, hence the painting.
Okay, and then you start incorporating some fun new technology. So this is the augmented reality version. If you download the right app and you aim it at one of your paintings, it moves.
Yeah, so this was innovation. So I thought, again, Renaissance was a lot about innovation, and of course, Silicon Valley is about innovation. But then Spot, I've been, a lot of conversation about Spot are uncomfortable. So.
Oh, I want you to tell people
yes.
the URL. To download?
So there is a QR code under this painting, and there are QR codes on the wall. So if you just point your phone, it's going to take you to augmented reality app. And then you can see all the paintings, all the work I do have augmented reality in them now. They are not just paintings. They have the secret life of machines behind them.
Yeah, it's interesting to point out that when artists deal with technology, oftentimes they're working through a lot of the conflicts and unresolved problems on the table. So you see a lot of artists dealing with privacy and data issues, or like Lynn Hirshman deals with both identity and also hacking genetic technology, because all of these things are conflicted, and it's hitting both sides of Silicon Valley, the great side and the abuse side. We see it every day. In the middle, last year, of your painting Spot, and finding all the wonderful things in it, at the very same time, America is going through a certain amount of stuff, including the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd. And Spot walks right into the middle of this conversation last year when the New York City Police Department adopted Spot and thought it would be a good idea to take him on patrol. So,
Jaron, could we see the video?
So let's roll this.
Other people might have seen it, but.
Go ahead.
The New York City police force a high-tech robo-dog, and not everybody's happy with it. As Stephen Fabian reports, some people say it should not be used to fight crime.
A police robo-dog is sparking a major controversy today. The machine was deployed by NYPD at the scene of a suspected hostage-taking in Manhattan.
I've never seen nothing like this before in my life.
Cops say the robo-dog can save lives by scoping out a crime scene without exposing officers to danger, but critics are calling the robo-dog creepy and even terrifying. What was the reaction from the tenants from the fact that this dog was used here?
Disbelief, shock, curiosity. I was horrified. Some people were horrified. And some kids went up to pet it because they're kids and they think it's a cute dog.
Some are comparing Robo-Dog to an episode of Netflix's sci-fi series Black Mirror, in which robot dogs turn on humans. A local congressman had this to say.
They got military gear, and now they got robot dogs in the streets, further oppressing us with robots now.
I mean, this points out what a loaded topic technology is these days. And the same thing you found that made it important in history making, it has strikes a very different responsive chord with other people.
Yes, this is my answer. So, so Spot is you can put different loads on the robot, and one of the loads is an arm, which I used for painting, and Spot has a whole body of work just painting with the arm. And one day actually I was at Boston Dynamics and I was just painting the robot without the arm, and these two engineers show up and they're very sad. Oh, how come you're not painting the arm? And they felt very left out. So I painted this giant painting. I thought about Michelangelo, of course, creation. And this is the painting I painted so these are arms of Spot, actually. Back to Renaissance. It wasn't by design. It just made sense to me.
This is both an example of your complete stubborn belief in the possibility and the humanity in all this, when others see something different.
Yeah.
And also the spiritual side, because I mean, this is about as spiritual as it gets.
Yeah, so again, we are now getting the moment that it's not just a God creating a man, or a man creating a robot, but it's a machine creating another machine. And I think we are, of course, in the sense that makes us things like gods, if we can create, yeah, and I don't want to get into it deeply.
This is actually a pretty big topic in AI now, right? Because when I first saw this, I was thinking, wait, the original was God creating man, so I would think there'd be a communion between the machine and man. But no, you just jumped to machines creating other machines, which it turns out that's exactly where we are with machines creating code, and then, do we even know what they're doing, and all that stuff. The singularity. You basically picked up the singularity there.
To the AR app to see the secret life. And then we get into this. So, yeah.
Okay, well, as long as we're dealing with spiritual things, right, our biggest aspirations, we tend to cast in the built world that we have.
Yeah, sure. So again, going back to kind of system of humanity or mankind, how we live is a system of symbols. And when we cherish something, we worship it. And to worship it, we create a building. And of course, again, Renaissance, amazing churches. And of course, now what's for us, what do we worship? The thing is, we worship technology. I think it's great. Some people think it's scary. But I see that parallel very, very strongly in terms of, it's no more, especially now with COVID, no longer a shopping mall, but it's technology. And it's more virtual than real. But I think Apple is just such an iconic building. I just wanted to point out.
Well, and what's important to us is what we invested in the physical world, right? So when the most important thing was, God telling us what to do in the medieval era.
So the whole cities used to be built around a cathedral.
Right.
And now the whole cities are built, of course, around the tech hubs.
20th century, we were built around giant skyscrapers, cathedrals to business and shopping centers. And then, of course, the other interesting thing that happens in COVID is we flip from the physical, we go into the virtual, right? The whole metaverse thing going on now.
Yeah, that's kind of AR kind of inspires me that. We haven't really talked about that slide. I kind of snuck it in there.
This one?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, yeah, well, you're completely, you're completely not conflicted because you have the machine as hero and basically, I mean, for you, the machine is the heroic figure, I mean, right? I mean, Zeus was a heroic figure, portraitures of heroic figures. This is, and in romantic paintings were unconflictedly, sure. And if you think of even, not to bother you with it, but even Soviet realism, right? These were all heroic.
Of course, yeah.
The worker was heroic. So, I mean, you're basically in that path.
Yeah, so again, going back to my kind of portraiture theme, portraiture and high art always centers around the central figures. No, that's not well, evolves around the center figures in each era. And if you look at art history, it would be religious, aristocracy. We're going to see the Dutch merchants, back to Rembrandt, of course. Then we're going to maybe jump to Warhol with celebrity culture in America. Now, in Soviet Russia, it will be, of course, the working man. That's where the whole conversation is around. Now we are in the me society, so the selfie, this is the moment. And past that moment, I think technology is the next power brokers in society. Hence, me as a portrait painter, I have to paint machines, and I think there might be my patrons.
Yes,
and there might be a museum and might come and look at this portrait the same way we go and look at portraits of old Mary Jesus or some medieval king, and the machine will come and we're like, oh, these are my ancestors. So that's my place.